Jambo, it's good to see you all today. My name is Grace Odhiambo Rao and I'm joining from Kisumu, Kenya. I work for a community-based organization called Women Volunteers for Peace as the executive director and founder since 2019. WOVOP is a young women-led organization based in western region of Kenya, and we work with girls and young women in peace, health and security promotion. I call myself a gendered peace practitioner, and for the last 4 years have been privileged to also work with a network of young people called United Network of Young Peace Builders as the regional coordinator for East and Southern Africa. My role in this case has been to support communication and provide visibility for youth-led organizations in the region, while also connecting them to resources and partners to amplify their work in youth peace and security agenda, but with a lens of gender perspectives. The work that I do revolve around putting women and girls at the apex of prevention and resolution of conflicts and violence from the grassroots to the regional level. This is because I do recognize that women and girls contribute heavily to their societies, even in conflict situations. Their contributions are, however, invisible. It is critical to provide visibility to these contributions and bring them at the heart of development cooperation. And so I'm grateful and honored to be speaking here today. I want to share with you one of my favorite things about my work, and it's to listen. Active listening is something I'm really passionate about. I enjoy telling stories and listening to stories and perspectives from different people, especially young people, on how to, how better we can specifically challenge stereotypical narratives in the community we live in. A lot of people likes talking, but no one wants to listen. And so it's important that we are seated here today and we get to listen to different perspectives on what being a feminist peace builder in the global south looks like from a young person. Do you know that being a feminist or a gender advocate in my culture is a bad thing? Do you know that if you identify as a feminist in a community, you are labeled names such as aggressive, angry, a protester, different? Yes, being different in my community is a bad thing. But we keep doing the work we do anyways. And through doing that, we never stopped. And we never also thought of stopping, because feminism is a belief of equal opportunities for all. And gender is what the society expects us, the role of women, men, boys, and girls to be. It's a societal construct. The result of these labels is being profiled, being sidelined, being called names. And barriers are put on you so that you don't participate in critical decision-making processes, because you will be asking questions if they allow you to attend those forums and spaces, and the questions about how and why that no one likes to really listen to. Therefore, a feminist foreign policy to me means one that recognizes the uniqueness of women and girls in Africa and adopts strategies responsive to the situations that we go through, thereby amplifying our voices. This should probably be the most important concept in the 21st century world, as we try to negotiate all the crises, all the conflicts, but also working for possibilities and opportunities. But just how practical is the feminist development policy? It's a deep concern for me, and I hope it is for you as well, now that this is a crucial meeting that is happening today. I would like to know how the policy will be implemented and if resources will be allocated to ensure that the issues that especially young people from the grassroots global south and on the young people who are on the forefront to create awareness on inclusion and gender transformation are hard, and they actually feel supported in that process. Hopefully this policy doesn't become one like many from my country, where we get to invest in developing very good policies with workable strategies, but they only end up in the office shelves. They remain part of a conversation in high-level panels in New York during EU summits, and put as a checked box for governments to boast over what they are doing and what they have done, but with no actions, no implementations, no nothing. And yet, on the ground, things are different. I want to also state from my experience on how it is tough to be a young person, on how it is tough to be a woman at the same time, and a feminist at the same time, and coming from a local community like I do at the same time. Those are 4 different identities that I hold, and it is tough, so tough to be, having all these 4 identities in one. These are already cultural and structural barriers that make it impossible for people like me, people who look like me, not to make it, not to succeed with, change agenda. I know quite a number of people like me who stopped their activism and advocacy work because of the terrible mental exhaustion, lack of acknowledgement and resource support from the world. Then what is the place of local young feminist peace builder in this strategy? I would really love to know how this looks like. In terms of decolonization, I'm concerned about how the policy attempts to redress the injustice of colonialism. The policy should not be concerned only about the historical colonialism, but also addresses the coloniality of subjectivity and labor and gender and race. It is not up to you to define what decolonization looks like for us. Does decolonization only look at colonial power relations? How about the shifting perceptions on how more support can be provided directly to people like me without going through intermediaries and multinational corporations? Maybe the issue is trust, right? Or the question of, do you have the capacity? Come on, are you questioning my capacity to understand my community better, or how long I've lived in the community that birthed me to be able to know best what needs to be done exactly in my community to solve our struggles? African problems needs African solutions, and not speaking for us is one of those solutions. I do not get to speak to donors in my work about the things that I would want to speak to them about. But now that I get the opportunity, I would like to say that even as you pursue equal partnerships in this particular policy, it should be built on trust and accountability, and must, include a strong commitment to transparency. We must also ensure that, partnership and partners are held to the same standards, and that all stakeholders are held accountable for their actions and decisions. In trying to shift power and resources in the system in favor of local efforts, donors and policymakers and other relevant stakeholders have come up with excuses such as local actors can't be trusted, and that's a trust deficit. They've also said that they lack capacity, and that means there's a lack of understanding of the peace building and feminism capacity of local peace builders. They also say that local civil society doesn't exist in this region, for example, and that's a clear indication that there's lack of awareness of the existence and diversity of local and feminist peace building efforts. They also say that the risk of fraud, funds going into the wrong hands, is too great, and that's prejudice around the financial capability of local peace builders. They say Local groups can't meet our strict compliance requirements, and that's fear of fraud, money laundering, and financing of terrorism. That means that donors want to, invest in low-risk projects. They also say that local groups aren't effective, and that's a clear lack of empirical evidence on the effectiveness of local peace building and gender perspective efforts. They also say local peace building efforts aren't scalable, and this acknowledges that local impact is worth investing in, but doubts about whether it can lead to wider impacts. Many global North partners and donors lose touch with whom they are trying to support in the process of checking the boxes of what is considered good philanthropic work. Quite often, the trust that Global South partners can deliver on proper documentation, receipts, name it, is not strong enough, and the lack of willingness or capacity to adjust to the needs and strengths of the partners leads to very strong power dynamic in the relationship that reeks of neo-colonialism. The root of much of this resistance lies in overt and structural racism, which is barely acknowledged by those in the system. All these still persist even after colonial rules has officially been abolished. And therefore, the power still lies with Global North, if you ask me. Also, when it comes to development cooperations, the Global North is the one who benefits. Colonization even exists psychologically in my context. The West is looked as the better developed and superior, and that is why our policies are said to be domesticated from global policies. And a lot of times domestication doesn't work for us. Contexts are not the same. So as long as the Global North dominates globally, politics will need to align with Western standards. And that means that women and girls will still be nowhere to be seen and heard in spaces where they should be. From what I understand, a feminist decolonial development cooperation seeks to be the catalyst for long-lasting equality and incorporation of currently underrepresented groups. And to do that, the Global North needs to adjust on certain things. And one of the things that I'm looking at is for them to step back or foster equal partnership. Instead of forcing their agenda, their own agenda, listen more and include everyone. The Afro perspectives are very important. These are some of the questions that I would want to pose to the audience today. Number one, what is the impact your NGO, your institution, currently has on minority groups? Number two, where do you already ensure equity in the work that you do? 3, where can you include more people, even if it means going an extra mile? 4, how would this inclusion impact society globally? And by the way, why is the Global South a minority if it is a majority part of the world's population? This is a question I've been having, and this is why, even though I used the term Global South previously, I for sure want to refer calling my continent a majority world instead of a Global South, and a minority world instead of Global North. My peace-building work on a feminist lens in the East and Southern Africa has been so fulfilling amid all the great challenges that we continue to experience. As we speak, Kenya is undergoing through a post-transitional moment with protests that most of the time stands violent. Every week there are people who are reported dead out of the happenings, even as we speak today. Schools are closed, businesses are closed, and nothing is happening if not fear and tension continuously being built among people in the community. How does this policy then make the situation better for the people it cares about in Kenya? And in Sudan, you have seen in your screens, it breaks my heart so much to see hundreds of people being very dead, women and girls suffering with nowhere to go and no one to come to their rescue. Uganda's parliament recently has passed a sweeping new anti-LGBTQ laws with even tougher punishments, making some acts punishable by death. With all this, you do realize that when Parliament passes a bill that is regressive on one set of human rights, that it only opens the door to other even worse laws. This affects you whether you are non-binary identity or not. Therefore, what are the potential effects of the feminist development policy in Kenya, in Uganda, in Sudan, and other nations in Africa with similar situations? I do acknowledge that the strategy has adopted the 3 R's principle in the development of this particular policy, and it talks about realization of the rights, the promotion of access to resources, and the strengthening of representations. These principles might, however, require very strong 4 P's in order for them to function sustainably. And I was thinking of 4 P's. One of them is participation. Women and girls and the people living with disability, representation in political and international leadership forums needs to be highlighted. They need to speak up and they need to share their perspectives, not only in national platforms, but also in international platforms, so that we get to demystify the stereotypes and also for them to share how well they need to be supported. Promotion. Promote the Afrocentric values and local solutions for local challenges. The policy should recognize that when you support and promote local solutions, you support sustainability, partnership, equal partnership, genuine partnership, unlimited support, reduce restrictions, especially when it comes to funding for local young feminist organizations. How then do you want to ensure that this equal partnership and understanding and reduce restrictions when it comes to the support? Prevention. How does the policy implementation looks like? How does the review and the monitoring process looks like? How practical is the policy? If you miss out on the practicality, then you miss out on why you have developed this policy in the first place. As I conclude, as a young person and a feminist and a peace builder, I understand that the importance of building strong and sustainable partnerships are grounded in mutual respect and shared values. I also recognize that there's need to create a safe space and an equitable environment in which all voices can be heard and all perspectives are respected. Development cooperations should be based on inclusion and collaboration, not competition and exclusion. It should also ensure that all stakeholders have an equal voice, regardless of their gender, race, class, or culture. This includes women and girls, youth who are often marginalized in decision-making processes. We must also ensure that all voices have equal access to resources, information, and opportunities. Partnership should be built on trust and accountability. I can't fail to mention this again. Partnership should be built on trust and accountability and must include a strong commitment to transparency. And we must also ensure that partners are held to the same standards and that all stakeholders are held accountable for their actions and decisions. I believe that when partnerships are based on principles of equity, inclusion, and collaboration, they can be a powerful force for positive and lasting change. And by working together, we can build a better future for all. We need to recognize that development cooperation is not just about economic aid. It is also about creating an enabling environment where people can thrive and reach their potential. This means that investing in education and healthcare systems and creating access to financial services and breaking down barriers that exclude certain groups. It is also important to ensure that development cooperations initiatives are respectful of the local cultures and resources, and this is very important. We need to recognize that development projects should be designed and implemented in a way that respects local cultures, values, and resources. Without this, the projects may not work. The projects may not go anywhere. Finally, we need to ensure that Global South and Global North partnerships in development cooperations are mutually beneficial. This means ensuring that Global South countries are not exploited and that resources are shared in an equitable way. There's a lot of work ahead. A lot of the work should be on listening more and taking actions, as well as holding all the stakeholders accountable, including CSOs, policymakers, and the German Ministry of Development and International Cooperations. All of them, holding them accountable and ensuring that this policy becomes not just a conversation, but an action.